Drakan Order of the Flame is a third-person action RPG and attack helicopter simulator developed by Surreal Software and released for the personal home computer in 1999. Anthony Bourdain once said that once you've played a Surreal Software game, you'll never stop wanting to beat the Warner Brothers to death with your bare hands, and I think that's beautiful. Oh, sorry boners, I gotta take this. That's my lawyer phone. You've reached Wang's House of Wangs, you bring the butt, we'll fill it up. This is Kal speaking, how can I help you?
No, you can't say that.
Which thing?
The Bourdain thing, Kal, you can't say that, it's slander.
Slander? I hardly know her. I'm sorry. Look, anyone who's ever seen my videos knows when I'm joking. I make it very obvious, and it's clearly not a threat to the Warner Brothers. You know I love our corporate masters, plus I'm pretty sure they're all dead.
You're going to get sued.
Okay, well, that's what I pay you for.
You don't pay me.
I gotta go. I'm doing a thing. Love you, bye.
What?
Surreal Software was founded in Seattle, Washington in 1995 with the intention of making games, but lacking experience and, more importantly, funding. Taking on contract work to stay afloat, they developed their own engine while pitching concepts to various publishers, eventually finding success with Virgin Interactive Entertainment, a subsidiary of the venture capital holding company Virgin Group, formerly Virgin Records. So you may consider it a blessing that in 1997, VIE shut down and Surreal was able to find a new publishing partner in Psygnosis. Psygnosis had been owned by a little company called Sony since 1993, but that's probably not relevant to this series at all, so just forget about that. It won't come up later. As you may suspect, this change in publishers also led to changes in direction and budget, but in a surprising twist, those changes were actually a good thing. According to a post-mortem on GameDeveloper.com, previously Gamasutra, the original concept under VIE was an RTS where you would play as a dragon taking over villages and, I assume, roasting virgins like a 14-year-old on Reddit. But with more freedom and more money, the team was able to expand the game, adding more RPG elements as well as the concept of a dragon rider who would engage in ground combat. The story of the game's development is interesting, and I'll link that postmortem in the description, but here's my point. If you choose to play this game today, you're playing a game that started as an RTS, lost its publisher, evolved into a hybrid RPG, came out in 1999, and was the first game the team had ever made. And when you take all that into account, it's a miracle the game exists at all, and that you can play it. Right now. For free, assuming you can get it running, which isn't too bad. You can get the game off myabandonware.com and the unofficial patch from a site called Aurochs Lair. It's in their download section, and it took like 15 minutes to set it all up, though I did have to also get Daemon Tools Lite to mount the Q file, since it doesn't give you an ISO for some fucking reason. It doesn't matter, just watch out for the ads in the Daemon Tools free version. Hey, this is editing Kal. It should go without saying, but if you fuck up your computer, it's not my fault, so only do this if you know what you're doing. Alright, love you, bye. Whatever. Mount the files, install the games, run the patch, move the patch files into the Drakan install folder because for some reason it put them in a subfolder even though you told it not to. Fiddle with the screen resolution settings until you find one that you can read, and then finally, unlike most of the humans who ever lived, you'll be able to step into the world of Drakan. The world of Drakan is rough. But it wasn't always like this. Some of its history is talked about in the games, there's also some in the manual, but there are still pretty big gaps, so I'm gonna be real with you. A lot of what I'm about to say is paraphrased from the background section of Aurochs Lair. As far as I can tell, that came from the official news site of Surreal Software. but I'm still not sure if that makes it official canon or if it's just some person writing sweaty fanfiction in between breathless rounds of scale Sona-driven masturbation, so do with that what you will. Unfortunately, there's also no in-game footage for this story beyond a couple of very nice sepia-toned still images that the camera pans lovingly around, so I'm gonna animate it as best I can over some kind of background video that I haven't chosen yet. Alright, here we go. In ages past, humans and dragons were enemies, but over time they were able to build a foundation of trust that culminated in a ritual which would bind the souls of humanity's greatest heroes to that of a chosen dragon. Together they formed the Order of the Flame and worked to protect both human and dragon kind. Despite the deeply intimate act of soul bonding, I don't think any of them were fucking if you were hoping for that. I'm sorry. I mean, I can't say it definitively, but my research has not uncovered any historical examples of that, and I don't know, I just don't think it's likely, from an anatomical perspective. For several centuries, the Order expanded its influence and brought peace to the warring kingdoms of man, but it's probably safe to assume that that was in the way that Europeans brought peace to the warring Native American peoples, which didn't turn out so great for them. Still, it was at least a prosperous and internally peaceful society under a scaly iron fist. Over time, a group known as the Dark Union was formed, I assume made up of the remnants of those same warring tribes that had been given the gift of manifest destiny. With the intent to overthrow the Order, they grew in power, recruiting riders of their own and performing dark and twisted magical experiments, knowing that one day they would tear down the tyranny of their oppressors and get a fair share of what the ancient texts call sweet dragon puss, or Dragussy. One powerful war mage and dragon rider named Navaros was a member of the Order of the Flame, but also, secretly, a member of the ruling council of the Dark Union. Frustrated with the Union's infighting and overall lack of progress, he killed the rest of the council and crowned himself head fucker. Then he left orders for his lieutenants and disappeared into the wilderness for 10 years. The Order just assumed he was dead until one day he showed back up at the Dragon Temple. The riders gathered to hear the story of what he had been up to, and Navaros spoke an ancient spell.
Dragussy!
This word of power tore through the building, I assume killing everyone there. This was the signal for the Dark Union to invade. They swarmed through the city, slaughtering its people, and thus began the Dark Wars, a bloody series of conflicts that ultimately destroyed everything the Order had built. Still, the Order did fight back, in a bid to gain ultimate power, or maybe because he had finally thrown off the chains of societal influence. Navaros took one last unholy step into the darkness of his inner soul, crossed that final and most tempting threshold that a man must never pass, lest he be consumed for his hubris. No longer content with heavy petting and the occasional rounding of third base, he sought to become one with his dragon, Kairos, consuming its soul and allegedly blowing a load of catastrophic proportions. As he took Kairos within himself, it is said that he uttered these words, "Tonight, we engage in a dark union." But sadly, and I don't mean to say I told you so, his body was unable to contain the mighty beast, and the attempt left him terribly deformed. Just really fucked up. On the bright side, it did make him nearly invincible and gave him the power to destroy anyone who would point at him and say things like, "Hey, there's that guy who fucked his dragon. Ew, that's so gross. Hey everybody, look at the dragon fucker." Now, unlike Navaros, the Order of the Flame wasn't taking this lying down, but like Navaros, they weren't strong enough to do anything about it. After suffering heavy losses and losing basically all of their settlements, the remaining forces gathered for one final battle, and their mages put everything they had into a single magical weapon called the Rune Blade. As Navaros gathered energy for some kind of spirit bomb, the hero Heron, riding atop his bound dragon Arok, stabbed the rune blade through his heart, but the eruption of magical force from the spell did a little and Heron went from hero to zero, just like that. Arok survived the explosion and went into kind of a dragon nap that causes them to be covered in stone and awaited the day that someone would wake him up or turn him into a nice decoration in a garden or maybe a foyer. With the war against the Dark Union over, and really just sick of humans and their stupid problems and how they were always trying to fuck them, but they wouldn't even take them out to a nice dinner or tell them they were pretty. They just send a what you doing text at like 2 a.m. and then get mad if they didn't text back fast enough. The dragons said, "Look, it's not me, it's you." And they left the world of Drakan forever, or until the second game, maybe. The remaining humans tried to rebuild, but the forces of evil lived on, fractured and unorganized, but still thirsty for blood, roaming the wastelands between isolated towns, cavorting with demons, and dragging people off into dark and bloody nightmares. I hope you enjoyed that, because believe me, my enthusiasm for that bit ran out after like the third drawing. That brings us to the present, 300 or so years in the future, where our protagonist Rin is walking through the wilderness back to her village with her little brother Delin. They're attacked by a roaming horde of monsters, and we see Rin put up a good fight before being overwhelmed and left for dead. The people of the village are massacred and kidnapped along with Delin, and she makes it back in time to find the only other survivor of her village on death's door.
Find the key, get the book, enter the temple, get the soul crystal. Find Erok.
And Rin vows to save her brother. But first, we need to figure out how to play this bad boy. And we better do it quick, because as soon as that cutscene ends, there's a Gruul wandering over to attack. And it took a bit of flailing around before I managed to equip a sword. Real quick, a Gruul is basically just your standard goblin. Sometimes the game accidentally calls them orcs instead. But they're little toad-looking guys. Not to be confused with the lizard men in later levels that carry grenade launchers. The game calls those goblins, even though they are clearly Kuotoa. The bigger warthog-looking guys are wartoks, but they're what I think most people would consider orcs based on the Lord of the Rings or World of Warcraft. The game sometimes calls them trolls though, which is silly because the 15-foot tall monsters that splatter you with one hit are clearly trolls, but the game calls them giants or yetis if it's snowing. I guess it doesn't really matter why the developers decided to play musical chairs with the enemies' names, but if you hear Gruul, think goblin, if you hear wartok, think orc, and if you hear goblin, know that your mom is nearby. To deal with that first Gruul, you could open the inventory and see that it's kind of a Diablo or Champions of Norath thing, and you have to drag items onto Rin to equip them, but the game doesn't pause when you do that, so instead there is a key that lets you flip through all the weapons. That's a key on your keyboard. It's really nice because you can do that while you're moving, which for $19.99 is just brilliant. I don't remember what it's set to by default, but I made it the mouse wheel, and then the only time I had to stop playing to open my inventory was to change armor. It's really nice. The transition to keyboard and mouse was one of the biggest things that made me hesitate to try this game, and the default bindings are really weird. I think it was like the original System Shock where you could play it with just a keyboard, but it's fully customizable and it didn't really take any time to just get it to the place that felt right. I'd say it plays better than the sequel in a lot of ways. There's no lock-on in combat, but mouse aiming is intuitive, strafing and jumping around is easy, and flying was fine. I wanted it to be more like how most games would let you use a helicopter, but turning also spins Arok around the roll and yaw axis, if that makes sense. That doesn't make sense, does it? If you try to turn while you're moving, but you turn too fast, he does a barrel roll at the same time, and it's really disorienting. But it didn't ruin the experience or anything. The only other thing that was kind of weird is that I think you're supposed to be able to do some special combat moves with certain keyboard combinations when you're fighting as Rin. There's a list of them in the manual, but I could never get them to work consistently. I'm not sure if that's just my big, meaty claws or something to do with the fact that the game was designed to run on a potato clock and maybe it just goes too fast on a modern PC. So I couldn't use those special moves easily, but it also didn't really cause me any problems in combat anyway. I didn't look very fancy doing it, but it wasn't any more of a struggle at least. We've got to be careful out here, Auroch. I've heard the Dark Union have sent their best flyers to stop us. What the fuck? Going back to that idea of a hybrid RTS RPG, the game is split into two loops that you could consider land and air segments, though it might be more accurate to say times you have a dragon and times you do not have a dragon, which is how I define my own life. Because if Auroch is nearby, then the combat problem sort of solves itself, most of the time. And if he's available, then those land segments will quickly become air segments whenever an enemy shows up.
Rin, I'll wait for you here.
While on the ground, Rin is a capable fighter. She's got the moves to put her right next to Lara Croft, but she is still facing off against an entire army of darkness. And in case that opening cutscene didn't make it clear, she does have her limits. Also, just because they're monsters, that doesn't mean that they're only going to come at you with teeth and claws either. These are orcs with swords and magic and, again, grenade launchers for some fucking reason. And cave trolls that throw explosive barrels and sometimes other enemies directly at you like a 20-foot tall trebuchet. I've mentioned that I struggled to pull off some of the fancier attacks consistently, but even when those did work, for me the ground combat is flailing and awkward. Enemies will usually react to the hits, but it still has that Skyrim problem where it feels like I'm beating them with a Nerf sword. Meanwhile, of course, they have regular weapons. Rin floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee, but only in the sense that it would take several hundred bee stings to kill the average person. I often found myself slamming potions and just hoping for the best. I didn't really feel like I could dodge or block incoming damage effectively, but if you give it a try, know that Drakan's combat is at its worst in the early hours. The sword that you start with is indestructible, fast, and short, but as you progress you'll find larger and slower weapons, and the damage they do will offset the speed that they lack, and the increased range will offset Rin's limited ability to evade. The vast majority of those weapons will also have limited durability, but I never felt starved for a means to attack, even if this game really only has melee as a viable strategy. That melee combat can feel a bit repetitive, but I do have to call out one thing that I loved, which was the dismemberment system. Hands and legs will fly off in the middle of battle, and sometimes with the enemy's weapons still held. Occasionally you'll get a full bisection. It feels real good. Blood spurts out of the severed limb, and if you run away, enemies will just bleed to death. Corpses that are left behind are physical objects too, and if you keep hitting them, they'll explode into a little shower of meaty gibs. Ah, the good old days. I love desecrating a body, and games make that easy without all the cleanup. Spells do technically exist, but are limited to single-use special crystals that you can find in the world. They do stack though, so at least there's that. But they're situational at best. There are also bows, but you'll want to save those for flying enemies, and the knights, which can be brutal in close quarters. Of course, they get spells, that's fair and fine. Speaking of difficulty, there are options for difficulty when you start the game. I played on normal since I was planning to review it, but if I had to go back and do it again, I would probably just play on easy, because the way the game handles difficulty is kind of awkward. From what I've read, it only affects how much damage you take from enemies, but I rarely felt like that damage was the result of a choice that I had made. Enemies will generally just run at you and swing their weapon, but they're faster than Rin, she can't block, and while she can sort of dodge, she also still takes damage while rolling or flipping through the air, so you can't really do much to stop getting hit. Your armor also has a durability, so in the early game it's easy to be left with no defenses at all. You can't repair items, and there's no healing spells, and there's also no concept in the game of a merchant. There's also no currency. You can't sell extra weapons or armor, and you can't buy new ones either, which means you also can't buy any healing potions. You've only got the ones that you can find in the levels or that the enemies drop, so taking 25% less damage on easy instead of normal wouldn't really feel like cheating to me when the other option is to just constantly reload if you take too much damage in a fight, because again, you can't evade or prevent it. Technically, there are cheat codes, but most of them didn't work for me, including the ones that would let me spawn more health potions or equipment.
What a thrill, with darkness and silence.
In spite of all that, I wasn't too frustrated with the game because it embraces that quick save and quick load mentality. I'd save when I was in a good spot, and if things went south, I'd just go back 5 or 10 minutes and try again. It made most things pretty manageable, though for the sake of honesty, I did wind up giving myself full health a few times when I didn't want to bother reloading a fight. If you just want the story, there is also a God mode, as a counter melody to the on-foot sections, which can be slow and cautious. Riding a dragon is awesome. There's just something about all that power rumbling between your thighs. It can be hard to hear my own manic laughter over the screams of the dying. Auroch is a flying fantasy attack helicopter spraying Agent Orange directly into the open mouths of those who once tried to bring you harm. When you're on his back, you are basically unstoppable, and most of the enemies in the game won't even be able to hurt you, though he's not totally invincible either, and you do take damage while you're climbing on him. Fighting enemies of equivalent aerial mobility is substantially clunkier than combat on the ground, though, because of that lack of a lock-on and the previously mentioned spontaneous evasive maneuvers. While you do gain several different types of breath attack, the one you start with will always be far and away the most efficient, both in dispatching your enemies and in its resource costs. Using Dragon Shouts drains this little ball in the bottom right corner, and you could easily blow that entire load on lightning or poison and still not have killed anything, while the flamethrower comes out like it's been snorting gas station dick pills and will clear just about anything in the game. As an example, about halfway through you'll meet the ghost of another dragon rider, and real quick, I love that the only other dragon rider we see in this game is a black woman. They didn't even give her a Cajun accent. It's really bold for game developers.
A soul shadow.
Hail from one once known as Turi, bonded of the dragon Takora, guardian of Allwarden.
She tells us her story. She died when she and her dragon fought to protect the town that used to be here from the army of the Dark Union. Her dragon died fighting a giant that was magically infused with a godly level of vitality. He was basically immortal. They threw everything they had at him, but eventually failed. and he was trapped inside the barrier spell that she had created to protect the town. He's been stuck down here for hundreds of years, alone and just going insane with hunger, starving to death but unable to die because he is just that much of a Chad, right? When you lift the barrier, he rises again, ready to get a taste of that sweet woman flesh. Watch my first attempt at overcoming this legendary monster on normal difficulty. That's what I'm talking about, alright? Auroch is not fucking around. When it comes to these two exploration loops, the sides of the coin are not exactly balanced. Auroch is out here committing genocide like his name is Microsoft. His fireballs have no drop-off, unlimited range, and unlimited ammo. His alt-fire is napalm that kills everything in less than a second, and his only weaknesses are render distance and having a fat ass. If he could fit through a human-sized doorway, he would solo the whole game, and I love it. This is how every dragon should feel. He's a wacky-winged, flyable, flaming war crime, and sometimes, when you use his flamethrower, it makes that noise like a really big laser. I think it's an audio bug from the game trying to play the sound effect every time it ticks damage, but I don't care. It feels good. But that poses kind of a problem though, right? Being on the dragon will pretty much always be more fun than being on the ground, and that makes sense. I can't imagine a situation in life that would not be the case. So the game has to come up with reasons to make you get down and walk around on your stupid, shitty human legs like a fucking loser. So I think it says a lot about the game that getting off the dragon doesn't feel like a punishment. Hold on, that sounds like a euphemism. Riding the bad dragon makes it hard to walk, but sometimes you've just got to grit your teeth and force yourself through a hole too small for that big boy, knowing that the temporary discomfort is rewarded with greater satisfaction. Yeah, I think that's better. The areas you explore throughout the game will range from dank caves to snowy canyons to spooky caves to an archipelago to the insides of a volcano, which is really just hot caves, but the loops will be largely the same. Dragon until you hit a door, human until you find a lever, dragon until you hit another door. It's a small bag of tricks to pull from, but it leaves a space that can be filled with interesting character development. I said can.
I'll wait for you here. I can't fly 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 here. I can't fly. I can't fly.
I like Rin, even with her freakish Barbie doll proportions and stupid chainmail with no undershirt. I still think she's a great character, though her role in this game of worried big sister would be a difficult one to spice up for the best of writers. And while I'm living in a glass house here, I'm still not certain that Surreal Software had the best writers, and even if they did, it wouldn't matter because she basically never talks. I'd be surprised if she had more than 5 minutes of dialogue in the whole game outside of the random barks at Auroch, which is a shame. Lanny Manella, who you might know from a few things, she was Bubsy, Rouge the Bat, Adria in Diablo, Eve in Mass Effect 3, the Big Fish in Subnautica, Ivy from Soul Calibur, and like 500 other games. She's just one of those VO workhorses in the game industry. Is it an insult to call someone a workhorse? I don't know. She's in basically everything. Still, what little screen time she gets is enough to establish who Rin is.
How's that, dragon dame?
How did you know about the dragon anyway?
Ascension spell. It's how I know when the warthogs are coming, and how I know you came here with the dragon.
Well, good luck, old man. I've got to...
Wait! You said you were looking for weapons. I know where a sword can be found, but you'll have to do a little chore for me first.
Why am I not surprised?
There's a mine back up the hill from here. I'd hide out there, but it's infested with spiders. Clean them out, and I'll tell you how to get the sword.
Pest control. You're starting to bug me, old man. Give me a challenge.
I love that she's bold enough to stand up to men and monsters. She's witty and intelligent, but still willing to help those in need on her way to save her brother. And even when all seems lost, she's strong enough to keep going because she knows she's the only one who can. I like Auroch too, but he gets to say even less than Ren. He's voiced by Jeff McNeil. No shade to him, but you probably wouldn't recognize him as easily as Ren, though he was the dictator in Just Cause 4, even though he's been asleep for a while. Auroch, not Jeff. As one of the oldest living creatures in the story, and considering how close he and Ren should be, what with the soul bonding, you'd think he would have some thoughts on what's going on or some tidbits of advice, but he's basically just transportation. These characters are bonded to the very fibers of their beings, and they talk to each other on screen for all of 2 minutes. I would give a lot for a dialogue system like the one from the 2016 God of War, where Ren and Auroch could banter and tell stories as they fly around like Kratos and Boy did on the boat. I want to know about this world and its history, stories of the battles in that big war and the cities that are just ruins now. Auroch has all this world-building potential, but you'd never know it from playing the game. Instead, you'll cruise around large, mostly featureless empty maps in total silence, with only the barest sprinkling of points of interest. For its first half, the story hardly exists. The war talks took Dylan, and I have to find him by guiding a dragon through an elaborate series of hallways like the world's deadliest pickman. While the story in these sections is sparse, I can still praise the developers for how much variety they tried to bring in the form of mechanical interactions.
That should take care of the spiders.
There are so many little one-off interactions in this game that I think you could almost put it in the same category as something like the first Half-Life. Obviously, that is a loaded comparison, and Half-Life is doing way more on the story front. But I beg you to remember that these devs were building this game 3 years before Half-Life 1 came out, though it would release a year later, and that it started as an RTS. Those little actions are sprinkled all over the dungeon areas of the game. Physics, boulders, chopping down a tree to make a bridge, avoiding swinging traps, weighing down a seesaw to blow up a giant spider, powering a mining rig to destroy a wall, and tons more stuff like that are sprinkled around, but critically, these things only come up once. They do help to spice things up, but I like a little bit more lore in my RPGs, a little more story. There are some attempts to add that, like the wizard guy who gives you a side quest, or the Grimstone mines which hint at a larger conspiracy, but they don't really go anywhere. The war talks bring the adults here to dig up rocks that turn them into zombies is a cool hook. But what is Grimstone? Why does it make people into slaves? What is it used for? Who made that giant crystal and hung it from the ceiling? All of these questions and more will not be answered. We just leave. God told me to meet him in mine too. I've been walking around these damn caves for an hour. Ah, thank God, a sign. I wish I knew how to read. But for Ren, unlike a Mar-a-Lago employee, things actually get better once she makes it to the islands. The map opens up and you get a sense that the game has finally hit its stride in several ways. For one, after fighting the same few enemies and receiving almost no narrative at all for several hours, This area opens with an honest-to-God conversation. It is with a group of succubi, which I think I'll have to censor for YouTube. They can be really weird about low-poly chicken breast, which is funny considering all the naked yoga they leave on the site. Funny in that sad kind of way. If you've seen my videos before, you might expect me to bitch and signal virtue about the naked big-titty demon ladies, but you'd be wrong, fucker, because that's what succubi are, and it's thematically appropriate for them to be that way. They tell Rin that Dylan was probably taken by the wizard who lives in a tower nearby, and that she'll have to answer his riddles 3 to pass his test and take the mysterious artifact known as the Rift Crystal. They don't talk like that, though. If she can bring it back to their queen, Shilla, then Shilla may be able to find Dylan, but Rin knows that you can't trust someone just because they're willing to get naked. Since Auroch was there when it was used, he knows about the Rift Crystal. It's the source of power for the Rune Blade. He thinks that if the demons are trying to get it, then they may already know where the blade is. And he tells Rin that they should fix the sword themselves. While talking to that wizard, he reveals a lesson that we must all one day learn, which is that demons are bad. Video games are full of wisdom for those with the eyes to see. He tells Rin that Shilla is actually the one importing the Grimstone, and so she'll be the one who knows where Dylan is, but he and Auroch convince her that Shilla is too powerful to face directly, and Rin will still need to take the test so that she can get the crystal. To do that, she'll need to find 2 artifacts that have been lost in the nearby archipelago, and you can choose to do those in whichever order you want. Which sounds a little silly to say. Things are looking up. You can do 2 fetch quests in whichever order you want. But again, we've been going from point A to point B for literally hours now, and it is really nice to finally have some more immediate goals and a little guidance. Both items are hidden in dungeons that will require more than just flailing around with a sword, though there is still plenty of that. I'm kind of mashing together the last 3 to 5 hours of play into one section here, but this level of quality keeps up for most of the rest of the game. And it's a nice change of pace from the relative desert of engagement that was the first half, which still had those nice bits of interactivity, but were still mostly combat focused. The platforming segments could be tedious, but quick saves keep the frustration at a minimum. And there are lots of little one-off touches to make these levels more memorable, like the bit where you get stuck in a room and have to cut a hole in the floor, or this fucking hallway that whispers at you as you walk through it. I didn't need that, alright? This isn't Silent Hill. You can't just suddenly be spooky, that's against the rules. There's also this section where you have to solve like 6 fire puzzles, and most of them are just timing or how can you jump over the fire. But one of them was get Rin wet in the fountain nearby and then walk through the fire. And just, what? This has never come up in this game before, and never comes up again, as far as I know, in either Drakan game. Like Ben Shapiro, I didn't even know Rin could get wet. It's brilliant compared to everything that came before the islands section. To be fair, again, I was still enjoying the game before that point, but I was getting kind of bored. It wasn't bad, it was just samey. I assumed the game had played all of its cards already with the dual exploration loops, but really I guess it just wanted to play them once near the end for some reason. Which is really nice in the year of our Lord 2026, where everything has become Skyrim and you just have the same fucking dungeons with the same fucking puzzle or trap or lockpicking minigame over and over and over. So you can be like, yay, my game's 100 hours long, and who fucking cares? Because the core loop of it is like 15 minutes long, and you get to do that 400 fucking times. I feel like I'm getting off track here. Things have opened up, but the more they change, the more they stay the same. Combat as Ren is still just whacking off monsters until they fall asleep, though it is easier as her arsenal of tricks has expanded, and if you're exploring then you shouldn't have to worry as much about not having armor. Combat as Auroch is still beautifully overpowered, but a bit repetitive. It may come as a relief, then, that after she gets the Rift Crystal, Ren walks out of the wizard's tower to find the wizard dying. Auroch has been captured by Sheila's minions, and Ren will have to save him, but how? How did they possibly capture... I know it's a story contrivance to force you to walk across this big-ass map. I get it. You can't even swim across it. They made the water always push you back to the start, so if you fall off these tall land bridges, you don't die. You just lose a bunch of time. It's really silly, but it's fine. They're just changing up the pacing. It's making the player feel threatened by the forces of darkness. I get it. But I don't want to be a sexy lady. I want to be a dragon. Ugh. Speaking of sexy ladies, the succubi layer is alright. It's at least different, you know? Especially compared to the hours of sandstone caves that we were walking through. There's magic and traps and doors with teeth and rooms full of giant house centipedes and gross wizard ghosts. There's also a neat little reference in here to the hit 2023 game Gollum, in the form of a room with an invisibility potion, and you can find Bilbo's sword Sting from The Hobbit, and later Frodo's sword Sting from Lord of the Rings, I guess. But if you want to talk references, I was turgid with joy, fully Leo pointing at the screen when I got the Mornbringer. In case you are not a 1960s fantasy book nerd, this is a reference to the Elric saga by Michael Moorcock, and those books are so goddamn good. I'm not even gonna make a joke about his last name. I haven't heard of any controversies about him yet, so hopefully he wasn't out there, locking a 4-year-old in a cage in his basement or something, because that would be really fucked up and kind of tarnish my memory of some of my favorite childhood books.
Attention, attention! The meeting will begin as scheduled in the Great Hall of Darkness. Attendance is mandatory for all thralls of evil, dead or undead, possessed on a permanent, part-time, or temporary basis. A reminder for those individuals who arrived late to the previous meeting, you are responsible for providing the post-meeting blood sacrifices for those of us who understand punctuality.
Catching up to Auroch, we find him chained down in a way that would be of great interest to the Dragon Riders of old, and he can't find release until we get the key from Sheila herself. But that might pose a challenge, as the Wizard of the Tower told us that her Dark Masters have given her great power. Let's see what she can do.
Sheila, give me the rune that opens the cage, now!
No, my little strumpet. You're the one who's gonna give me something. The Rift Crystal.
The only thing you're going to get is a funeral if you don't give me that rune right now.
Ah, yes. I can see how that might be a threat. The ways of demons are truly beyond the ken of mere mortals. Hey, this is Editing Cal again. I just wanted to let you know I didn't add that fart sound effect in. It just does that every time she attacks for some reason. Thankfully, she dies pretty easily to normal swords, and once she's dead, she also drops another elemental breath type for Auroch. I mentioned that they aren't very useful, but the animation to pick them up is pretty cool. Weird, but cool. Every time you grab one, he's completely obliterated. Just fucking atomized. And then slowly put back together. Maybe some wires got crossed when that happened though, because this was also the point in the game where things started to break down for me from a technical standpoint. I have heard that the game was pretty buggy with its original version, but I guess the community patch had fixed a lot of that for me. But despite all the improvements I mentioned before, this section of the game was also the worst for me, specifically because of these bugs. And I feel like I have a decent tolerance for bugs, and I wouldn't even normally mention them unless they were really funny, but these cost me hours of playtime in just the last, level of the game. There was one section where you get locked in a room and you have to fight 4 of those death mages to open a force field in the ceiling, but they fell through the ground, and you're locked in the room. I wound up smashing my head against the walls and ceilings for a while, and eventually they just fell back into the room somehow. And then when I finally got up through that force field, the level had not loaded properly. It was really weird. Thankfully, I could just walk back out through this, low level of distance version of a hallway. At another point, you get locked into a different room with some knights and you have to fight them, but every time I killed them, it would crash the game. Unfortunately, I had reflexively quick-saved in that room, and eventually loading the save itself would just crash the game too. Thankfully, I made backup saves at the beginning of each level, but this one level at the end winds up being 2 hours of game time. So I had to reload and kill Sheila again and go down the secret elevator to get the key for the dragon armor. And when I came out of that elevator, Auroch was gone. Okay, he wasn't gone. He was on the other side of this wall, standing on the ground. And in this game, if you try to call Auroch to you and you're both on the ground, he won't come to you. He just yells at you and calls you lazy for not walking to him. I had unwittingly quick-saved on my way out of that building after he landed over there, and to be clear, this is before that room with the knights. It didn't happen the first time. There's no way to walk through this part of the level. I can't jump over the wall, and the fall to the ground below will kill you. Of course, if it didn't, you'd also be walking on lava, so that sucks. Luckily, like I said, there is a God mode cheat code, so I turned that on, I go down in the lava, and I walk all the way around both sides of the tower, and there is a path to walk along the sides of this canyon wall, but they're up a little hill that Ren just slides down and she can't jump high enough to get up on it. So I reload at the beginning of the level, and I do it all again, and when I come out from the elevator with the dragon armor key, Auroch is stuck behind the wall again. Thankfully, this time I knew to save earlier, so I wound up just reloading and walking out of the building over and over until he landed in a place that I could get to, and then I finished the game 45 minutes later. So I guess now is as good a time as any to put up a spoiler warning. Go to the time on screen if you'd like to avoid spoilers for this game that's old enough to have finished medical school. While you're making that decision, let's see, what's in the news lately? Hank Green uses AI to research his scripts. I've never really watched his stuff, but, really, a rich guy falling in love with the machine that steals from poor people and tells him how smart he is? Gee, who could have seen that coming? Couldn't be me, whatever flaws these videos may have. And they are legion. It's all me, baby. I do it all. I play the games, I write the scripts, I record and edit and make dog shit thumbnails. All for you. Maybe that's part of why I like these old games too. You can feel the human touch in all the rough edges. Computers are tools. They'll never be artists.
Hello, Moto.
God, work. Hello, this is Cal's Pizza Palace and Euthanasia Clinic, where your loss is our sauce. This is Cal speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, do you do euthanasia on people or pets?
Well, how big of a pizza do you need? Anyway, there's still a bit more fighting and a couple of decent little puzzles before finding the rune blade, which, like any other legendary sword, you're going to get when there's nothing to use it on but the final boss. Finally, we find Delin in the middle of being sacrificed in a ritual. The Dark Union has been searching for a suitable host that they can use to bring Navaros's spirit back from the interdimensional void plane that it fell into when that magical explosion went off. And of course, our little brother has just the right measurements. What happens next isn't really well explained, and I've read that is because of the rush up to the game's release. Apparently, they had to drop some intended cutscenes with the expectation that they could flesh those things out in a sequel that had already started pre-production before this game released. So I hope that works out. But here's what we know. Navaros has possessed Delin's body. Rin fights him with the rune blade and forces the evil spirit to flee, which frees Delin's mind in time for him to awkwardly fall off the ledge and into the dimensional rift below. Navaros then comes back through the rift, apparently possessing the body of his dragon, Kairos, that was also trapped on the other side for some reason. This is the part that doesn't really make a ton of sense to me. If he already had a body and he could bring it through the hole, why did they need Delin? But we're just gonna roll with it. In the final battle, Rin and Auroch have to kill the 600-year-old four-headed flesh-like corpse puppet and seal the rift before escaping, leaving Delin behind in the void. Rin believes him to be dead, but we see a scene of his eternal fall through the inky blackness, being watched by a sinister figure who laughs just out of frame, clearly implying that this isn't the end of Delin's story. Honestly, I think it's a pretty solid ending, assuming there's a follow-up. The only problem with that was, for me, there was no music at all, just this looping wind noise.
My dear Delin, I am so sorry.
Apparently that might be an issue with running the game on modern Windows, but I think I had music before those last few hours, and I found another long play on YouTube with the same problem, so maybe there's just no music for this big climactic battle? I actually tried listening to the soundtrack while writing this review, and I wasn't super impressed by it anyway. It's just kind of a generic fantasy music soundtrack, so I guess I wasn't missing much. Also, Rin doesn't really talk at all aside from to say her brother's name and that she's sorry she couldn't save him. There's no big climactic conversation with Auroch or witty comments before going into the rift. She's just totally passive in the story after killing Sheila, and it's a shame because this would be a pivotal scene for Rin as a character in any other work of fiction. All of this struggle, the whole point of the game was to save Delin, and is ultimately for nothing. I mean, thankfully she still prevented Navaros's return, but in her goal, she failed. Obviously it's not her fault. She slaughtered an army of monsters to get here, but right at the end, to just watch him fall away into the darkness has to be devastating, and we don't see it. The game just ends. That part of the ending is not great. Not because she fails, but because it's over so quickly that it lacks any sense of catharsis. I wish that we had more time with Rin and Auroch at the end to get a sense of how they feel in this moment and the consequences of what happened. Still, it's obviously setting up for a sequel that will continue that story. Delin is still alive as he falls. He's just lost in whatever dark dimension Navaros was stuck in. We know that Drakan takes place in something of a multiverse full of magic, so I can't complain too much. The seeds are here for an epic fantasy story, and you could do almost anything with it. I said could. I think that's it for spoilers. Critics at the time were generally positive on Order of the Flame, though the best parts of the whole would change depending on who you talked to. I especially liked this review from IGN. Normally I don't even bother to talk about what game critics have to say because, honestly, who gives a shit? But I found this one so interesting that I just really wanted to share it with you because the guy likes the game but has like a visceral hate for the sexualization of the main character, going so far as to write a little fan fiction of himself interviewing the concept of cleavage in video games. The idea of 2 bits of skin forming a fold on a human's upper torso. He blames Tomb Raider for the meteoric rise in popularity of breasts in gaming, as if that hasn't been a thing since they slapped a pair of milkers onto Pac-Man. Then he tells the imaginary cleavage that smart people might choose to avoid games that feature revealing clothing, and ends the interview by asking to be excused, as he needs to conduct his next interview with the other star of Drakan.
Ass.
Please tell me that's not what I sound like. Look, there is nothing wrong with pretty ladies in games. I just don't like feeling manipulated, you know? I don't want women's bodies used as bait to try and get my money, or for it to make real women uncomfortable in the gaming space. The industry will just slap tits on a turd and call it a good game if it thinks it can get away with it. And I'm not down with that, but I don't think the other option is whatever this is. Thankfully, Ren's cleavage, generous as it is, actually doesn't affect the game at all, and you don't even see it most of the time since the camera is actually behind her. So it's good that I don't think the designers intended her breasts to be a load-bearing pillar of gameplay. I can't believe I'm defending polygonal tits from IGN. What am I doing with my life? Look, I'm happy to say that despite a lack of breast-related mechanics, Drakan is still pretty fun, and Ren is a great example of a well-written female character in gaming media, and we can be proud of the developers for that. We don't need to talk about how on the Surreal News website they had a page prominently linked in the nav bar dedicated to the nude Ren mod. We don't, okay? We can ignore how they promoted making her more sexual and said that if it would get you in trouble with your parents, then not to blame them. We can do whatever mental gymnastics are necessary to say that it wasn't owned by the company, even though it calls itself the official news site for the company, and specifically thanks the vice president of Surreal for allowing them to run it, including its page dedicated to high-quality scans of the real-life model that they hired to promote the game, with the link to the nude pictures right below it. And we can ignore how that's kind of implying that you can see this woman naked in the game, even though I'm sure she probably didn't agree to that. That's not weird. That's totally It's strange to think of Drakan as an RPG in the traditional sense. It has no character customization, no real choices, no ability to level up or become stronger outside of finding a better whacking stick, and almost no concept of greater world building. That's not to say that it's a world completely devoid of lore or narrative, but it is a thin bite if you're a player who is generally invested in a game's story like I am. If you had a graph for RPGs and on one side you had Planescape Torment, Drakan is the other side. There are valid reasons in the game for why this might be the case, but it's the way these things are framed in the game that lets it down. And I genuinely think that this is the result of the way the game was made. The lack of experience in the team, and the pressures they were under as they built this thing from scratch over 4 years while walking the tightrope between publishers. In that context, Order of the Flame is a triumph. But taking the game on its own merits, it does feel bare, and clunky, and repetitive. And yet, I found myself really enjoying my time with it. I'm not sure if that's because I already knew Rin and Auroch from the game's sequel, or simply the joy of fulfilling the lifelong fantasy of burning alive everyone who has ever looked at me askance. It's a coin flip, really. Still, I wish there were more here. You can tell me that humanity is going through a dark age and the world is full of monsters, but the village that Rin possibly grew up in that is now a smoking ruin is the only place that we ever see where people seem to live, except for that one guy's house in the middle of a field. From what I can tell, that village doesn't even have a name. Surely at some point, someone would need to be told about the city, and Ren would presumably be the one to tell them what happened. I can tell myself that that village was an outlying settlement on the fringes of civilization, that the war talks took Dylan out into the heart of the wilderness, and that the greater human empire is just the other direction. But it would be cool if the game said that, you know? Maybe in that area where the random guy lives, we could find a patrolling group of soldiers and inform them of what happened to the nameless village. They could also tell me how cool my dragon looks and compliment the luster of his scales before they, tell me how they'll have to go inform the queen or whatever. Give me something. It's little offhanded stuff like that that informs the player that the world is not just a bunch of polygons that were pushed down on a flat plane with an invisible wall so you can't fly high enough to notice. To be fair, it's possible that they did plan to do more with the story, like after the final battle, but I remember how the RPG elements came later in development, and it sort of makes sense in that context. If the earlier maps were designed primarily for that RTS gameplay and later retooled for the Rin sections, but it doesn't explain how they were going to deliver the story in the RTS version either. That postmortem mentions that as the release deadline approached, the team decided to cut the intended 14 levels down to 10 and to try to make those the best they could be, but there's probably still several more levels in the game that could be cut out and you wouldn't really notice. Speaking of things they could have cut, Drakan also contains a multiplayer mode that I believe does still work with some patching, but I simply have no desire to learn about it at all. Multiplayer modes are for people with friends, and I make videos on YouTube, so you can probably infer the rest of the sentence. The game would probably be better with that time given over to fleshing out the characters and the world, but I'm aware that that's not actually how time works, you know? You can't just say, wow, the last 2 years was kind of a bust. Let's just Control Z and try that again. But I would really appreciate that ability if there are any genies in the audience who could give me that power without some kind of monkey's paw attached to it. Anyway, the point is that this game is fun, but its setting lacks a sense of place. It's like if you were playing D&D in the Forgotten Realms and your town on the Sword Coast got burned down. You as a player, and I would assume your character, have at least heard of Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate, the third one. You have a concept of the greater world. You're not just out there with your ass in the wind surrounded by goblin camps. But I can't tell you the name of Ren's town, country, or continent. I can tell you the name of the planet. It's Drakan, which feels like an accident, you know? Like when someone has to make up a name and they just put together what they can see. The manual says, it's the world of Drakan, but that's like the world of Warcraft. The planet isn't named Warcraft, it's Azeroth. World of Warcraft is a narrative framing. The world of Drakan is the 5, I guess, living humans and several hundred monsters. And that's fine. It's cool, really. Just, I would like a little more meat on the proverbial role-playing bone. There is at least one canon bit of lore that you could check out if you're ready to suck the marrow out of that bone. There is a Drakan comic. It was only released in Germany, apparently, and never translated, which is really strange for a game that was made in Seattle, but what the fuck do I know about advertising? I can't even promote my YouTube channel without feeling like a moron. Please like and subscribe if you want to. If you'd like to check out that comic, they've got a scan of it on Auroch's Lair. I read through it with the Google translation on my phone, and I mean, for a promotional comic that was made to build some hype for the game, it's got some okay art, but also some real sweaty boy themes and panels. Lots of cleavage and ass shots and background sex going on. It's set before the game, and at one point, Rin gets captured and molested by bandits, and then she's like covered in goo for some reason, so she's got to get that bath in. It sort of feels like a Conan comic if the writers and artists also wanted to bust fat nuts to Conan, which, now that I think about it, maybe they do. I don't remember many scenes of Conan getting groped by bandits, but I'm not saying they're not out there. I haven't read Conan in like 15 years, maybe it's really progressive. But I don't think you'd be missing much by skipping the comic. The lack of translation aside, I'm not sure how canon it could possibly be, considering Rin meets Auroch in the story, but then she obviously doesn't know him in the game. But it's there if you want to check it out. After that, if you're scouring the internet like one of those sucker fish desperate to slurp up any Drakan-adjacent goo you can find, there are also a bunch of probably not canon user-created levels curated again on Auroch's lair. I'm not that kind of gamer. I don't really fuck with user-created content, but I would be remiss not to mention it. They've got a whole rating system set up, but obviously use protection if you're going to download files off random websites. Even if it's not for me, it's exactly this type of passionate, dedicated fan base that motivated me to want to check out Order of the Flame in the first place. The game has its fair share of shortcomings, but basically all of my criticisms can be effectively waved away by the reality that it was the team's first game, and it was made in 1999. Even with those weaknesses, it was still a financial success for the team and earned a surprisingly large and supportive community. I'm not really one to say that any game needs a remake. I told you exactly how to play this one right now for free, but this is exactly the case where that argument might have some value to someone. There's a lot of room to expand on what's already here. I'd love some time before the intro to just explore as Rin, to connect with Delin, to learn about the world and then have a reason to care when he gets captured, and to see what happens after. Technically, you can already see what happens after in the PS2 sequel, Drakan the Ancient's Gates, but that's a story for another day. I have a video on that game already if you'd like to check it out, but I am also working on remaking that one the same way I did for Mega Man and Maximo, so if you want to see that new version when it comes out, I guess you'll have to subscribe. But that's all for this one. Take care of yourself, and as always, thanks for watching. Later.